You can count when you're happy. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can count when you're sad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or count when you're frightened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count when you're mad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Counting is wonderful. Counting is marvelous. Counting's terrific and how.
The episode opens underwater from the perspective of some sinister kryptonite, lying in wait for some poor moron who might just be dumb enough to walk out on a frozen lake to heroically save a football from freezing to death. We hear the muffled sounds of loud music and underage drinking while we see the kryptonite glowing dangerously like it's affecting someone even though no one's around. Somebody really should explain POV to this director. We then meet Sean Kelvin, whose ironic last name destines him to be cursed with yet another crypto power. But before that happens, we have to spin the wheel of bad guy character quirks, and he's stuck with hitting on every girl he sees, including Chloe, who knows he's a jerk but only seems interested in him because Clark's still infatuated with Lana and won't notice her. So Sean falls through the ice trying to get that football, and that pesky kryptonite turns him into a heat vampire. He's a constant popsicle now and has to steal heat anywhere he can get it. Naturally, because Smallville antagonists must be killers, body heat lasts longer than anything else for him, and he goes after all those girls he's ever hit on or ever thought about hitting on. Meanwhile, Lex is still playing matchmaker, and he's about as irritated as the audience about how non-proactive our main character is. So he bribes Clark to ask Lana on a date with Radiohead tickets and a limo ride. Lex actually propels all the real plot in this episode, as the other subplot revolves around him cleverly convincing Jonathan and Martha to come to a financial meeting at the mansion for farmers in the area, which only they were invited to, and he tries very hard to get Jonathan to let him help out as the farm is in financial trouble. He talks a good game about being an investor rather than a lender, and I particularly like Lex's line, "Let me help you get where you never need someone like me again." But Jonathan remains characteristically stubborn about not accepting help from the Luthers and ultimately declines, taking out a bank loan instead and still wondering why Lex is so interested in his family. Clark bails on his non-date with Lana to stop the heat vampire, which he finally does. Lana makes Clark feel bad about running off, and naturally Clark has no decent excuse whatsoever about why he left. Everyone suddenly moves really slow in the hall at school while we're supposed to feel really bad for Clark as he's standing still, which is reinforced by the song played over the sequence called Standing Still, and then credits. Once again, Lex is carrying another episode all by himself. I like that he's the instigator of both the subplots, trying to hook Clark up with Lana and trying to save the Kent's farm. If you've been watching the show, you know he has ulterior motives for doing all this, even though the mystery of how Clark saved him from the wreck on the bridge is never brought up in this episode, and it's kind of cool that it isn't. And at the same time, he seems pretty sincere about liking these people and wanting to help them. Lex is already becoming a really complex character, and there's some pretty sophisticated stuff happening with his psychology. He's so likable. He really makes me believe that he can kind of have his cake and eat it too. Yes, he wants something, but what he wants is kind of understandable. He had a brush with death and he wants to know how he survived, and wouldn't anyone? If Clark really has some incredible supernatural ability, Lex knows he'll never get answers by constantly interrogating him about it. He obviously has true admiration for Clark and for his parents, a healthy and caring relationship built on principles of integrity and honesty that Lex is intrigued by and has respect for, but are ultimately foreign to him because of his own colder upbringing based on principles of power and manipulation. So yes, Lex is somewhat manipulative, but his motivations are understandable, and he seems to have a genuine interest in the people he's helping, even if there's also something he wants from them. There are a couple more clever nods to Superman lore that are subtle enough they don't come off as forced into the script. One is at the party by the lake during the teaser where it's really cold outside, and when Chloe sees that Clark isn't cold at all, she says, "What are you, from an ice planet?" And then a little later, she tells Clark that blue really looks good on him. I also really like Allison Mack's performance in this episode. There's a sparkle in her eye when she's with Clark. She's very comfortable with him, and it really does feel like they've been friends for a long time. While I'm not a big fan of the love triangle this episode plants seeds for between Clark, Lana, and Chloe, it's definitely not a stretch that she's into him, and I get a much better sense of why Chloe is interested in Clark than why Lana is. There's actually a lot more chemistry there. The scene where Lex bribes Clark into asking Lana out is a fun bit, and once again, it's very genuine. The relationship isn't forced like Lana and Clark's is. These two guys have nothing in common, yet there's a real spark between them in some of these early episodes that's hard not to smile at. There's something pretty hilarious about Martha almost hitting Lex with a chainsaw on the farm. I don't know why, but it just cracks me up. Maybe it's because I've seen the whole series. If she'd taken his head off right then, so many fewer people would have gotten investigated, tortured, experimented on, or killed. And Rosenbaum adds a great touch of comedy when he puts his hands up and says, "I come in peace." I don't like this Kryptofreak at all, but I do appreciate that he has a power that can incapacitate Clark without the use of Meteor Rock. For the first time in the series, there will not be any entry on the scoreboard for Clark being affected by green kryptonite. We're kind of back to horror movie mode, and that's okay, having a Kryptofreak who, rather than having some contrived revenge motive, just has an uncontrollable need that gets people hurt. He's turned into a monster, really, and like I said, it's kind of vampire-like. He really did nothing wrong that turned him into this creature. Okay, he did something stupid, but nothing morally wrong, and I can feel sympathy for a guy who's just trying to survive. But then all that's kind of ruined by the fact that he kind of seems to enjoy it. When he romantically lures Chloe to the school swimming pool so he can suck the heat out of her, there's a second where he seems really apologetic, like, I can't help it, I don't know what else to do. And then he immediately taunts her, delivering the next line this way, I promise it won't hurt, Chloe. So we've got a football jock who gets as many women as he can, like he's trying to rack up a high score in a video game, and he's probably getting intimate with a lot of them since the girl he kills wants to get in the shower with them. Then he immediately starts going after all these girls with the explanation of body heat lasts longer, as if he has no other choice, and it's only after he started killing them that he tries anything else besides fire. He electrocutes himself on a power generator in the last act of the episode. Why didn't he try that first? I get that he's scared and freaked out and everything, and maybe if he'd killed one person on accident and then felt bad about it and started trying to find other ways to get warm, I could appreciate him a little more. And if body heat lasts longer, why not try animals before people? Oh, and to nail down the negative coffin, like I said earlier, he's an idiot. We've already had a few Kryptofreaks before this, so if this formula is going to continue working, and if we're going to keep spending so much screen time with these guest stars, the show needs to work harder at making us want to know about them. If they're going to be two-dimensional excuses for Clark to fight somebody, they should be largely in the background, like Jeremy Creek in the pilot. There might as well have been some ticker tape running at the bottom of this episode saying, sorry, we really didn't have enough material for a full show this week, so here's a bunch more of this guy. Oh, and I'll take this opportunity for a side note. Everybody's really broken up about the girl Sean killed in the shower. I guess as time goes on, they just get used to their peers getting picked off one by one each week, because they hardly ever freak out like this later. You also gotta love how, even with all the talk later about how kryptonite-infected people aren't really responsible for their actions, and we'll get into that a lot more in future reviews, nobody seems all that upset about the deaths of any of these Kryptofreaks, like everyone collectively takes the position they all deserve to die. Pete even makes fun of Sean after his death, when he tells Chloe to stay away from, quote, heat-sucking horn dogs. Lana was trying really hard to be a little more likable the last two episodes. And not interesting or anything, but likable. And that's all kind of thrown out the window here with just one line of dialogue. Lana's upset that Clark ran off in the middle of their date or non-date or whatever, and rightfully so. But I hate how she represents herself as a shallow, walking cliche at the end. When Clark finally just comes out and says, why do you date Whitney? And I, by the way, like that he finally asked that question. She responds with, because whenever I need him, he's there. I guess he makes me feel safe. Wow, what is this, the 50s? So much for all that progressive, independent woman talk we've been hearing for the last several decades. Lana needs a man to protect her? I'm sorry, but I was a sophomore in high school when this episode aired, and I don't remember ever hearing any girls talking like that. Why can't Lana just be grateful when somebody saves her from whatever dire peril she's gotten herself into this week, no matter their gender, and try to have enough self-respect to try to take care of herself when she can? I mean, I can appreciate a sense of security, but that can't be the only reason you're dating a person. And it's also just a really stupid thing to say, especially when you tally up the number of times already Clark saved her life versus how many times Whitney has, though I suppose she's been conveniently unconscious most of the time, and Whitney took all the credit in Metamorphosis. I get that Clark's in high school and still finding himself and all that, but the guy really needs to turn into a good liar quick. I get the sense that the reason Clark never has decent excuses for why he has to run off and save people is because the writers feel like if he was really good at that, he'd look manipulative like the Luthers and therefore unsympathetic. But you know, when classic Clark Kent gave Lois Lane clever excuses for why he and Superman were never in the same place at the same time, be it George Reeves or Christopher Reeve or Dean Cain or whomever, nobody ever pointed at him and said, Superman's such a jerk, always lying to Lois Lane like that. It was just seen as part of his charm, and it was accepted because he's got to protect his friends. But here, Clark gives Lana, no reason at all for why he had to run off when he saw that news report. It would be a lot better to come up with a good story than just leave her hanging. This is also the beginning of what will become a running contrivance, that just because the script says so, Clark is brilliant at keeping this huge secret from the world, even though he's the worst liar ever. And questions to ask Drell when I get to heaven, I've just got one this week. If Clark's a math genius, why doesn't he ever use that again? When his folks are calculating their expenses, Clark walks in and starts rattling off figures he gets in his head while his parents need calculators. I don't recall him ever doing this again, and there's no explanation as to why he's good at that. Is it a superpower? Does he have that old Silver Age super intellect? It's painfully obvious this idea was either forgotten or abandoned, since Clark increasingly will start having computer hacking expert Chloe do everything for him on the research front, and it seems like he can't order a pizza online without going to Chloe for help. It just seems like if he can do big calculations in his head, he's probably smart enough to do some of the stuff Chloe does later. And now let's jump over to the scoreboard. We've got one new Kryptofreak, Sean Kelvin, get it? Who gets his powers by falling into a frozen lake filled with kryptonite, and his villain motivation is, brr, I'm cold. We've got the seeds of a new love triangle between Clark, Chloe, and Lana. We've got one new car crash when Lana and Whitney go off the road to miss Sean. We've got one bad guy who dies in a fight with Clark, of course that's Sean, and we've got a brand new category. We've got one new Chloe killer, and of course that's Sean Kelvin. I'm going to score cool a 2 out of 4. Pretty average, really dull Kryptofreak, and I don't really like Clark and Lana at all this week. But as usual, Lex saves the episode. Was there an item I missed in any category? Send me a personal message on Geekvolution on YouTube, and I'll be sure to add it to the count. I'm Captain Logan, and consider this episode counted.